this keeps banging around in my head that this is just part of the overall scheme to move us backwards. Now, you may remember there was a little scandal a couple years ago. Back in August 2020, you may remember a little bit. Aunt Becky got herself into a little bit of trouble. Remember Aunt Becky? What was that? Full House. This actress Lori Loughlin, her and her designer husband, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get their kids into USC because they want the best for them. And they ended up doing a little bit of jail time, a little community service, some fine money, all of that stuff, because they wanted to get their kids into USC. And they didn't have the grades. In fact, this is the part that just blows my mind. They didn't even want to go. The kids are like, well, if it'll fit into my schedule, I want to party and I want to go to the games and I want to do all that, but I don't care about school. I'm doing my social media thing, doing my influencer thing. But they bought their way in, and they weren't the only one. I think, what were there, like 60 other parents that got caught up in this? Rich people trying to get their kids into, big name schools. And their kids are basically idiots. But hey, they got money. Congratulations. The U.S. Supreme Court just said, you know what? You got the money. That's going to be enough to get you into these places. The money is going to be enough to get you where you need to be. And, I keep coming back to this. This is not going to help working class people. And I know there's some are going to say, this is a huge victory for fairness. It's not. It's not going to help working people at all. It's just going to harm others. And our campuses are going to be much less diverse. Our campuses are going to have fewer minorities, even applying, fewer minorities graduating. And that comes with a whole sort of other bunch of problems. But you know what? Our Supreme Court, making America white again. Dividing us up. And look, on the education front, this is another one of those things. I'm thinking, what's next? Is Brown versus Board of Education next? Are we going to go back to separate but equal? Are we going back to, how far back will this Supreme Court take us? Now, look, Rick, why do you care? You're a white guy. I care because I want working people to have an opportunity. What I know here, this is about the power and influence of the few. They didn't go after the legacy people. They didn't bother. And I saw a statistic that the majority of people who get into these places are legacy students. Because daddy and granddaddy, they both went, you're going to get to go. What happened to that meritocracy? Oh yeah, for you at the bottom, there's a meritocracy. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But for our elite, our Donald Trumps, who can't put a sentence together and went to one of the most elite schools in this country, as long as you can pay the freight, man, you're in like gold. George W. Bush used to joke about the fact that he was an idiot. He used to joke about the fact that the best he was a C student and got into Yale and a Harvard MBA. So don't tell me that there are undeserving people who got a hand up and that somehow that's harming you. It's ridiculous. Let's quick go to the phones. Who we got and what's on your mind?
Yes, thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, what's on your mind?
This is like Simone. Have you ever heard of Simone Earl Sears, the lieutenant governor from Virginia? She
have.
said this is a great day of America.
Okay.
It ends discrimination by ending discrimination.
Okay.
And the mere fact that this is a beautiful day because we now know, just like Martin Luther King said, people are going to be judged by their character, their content of character, and not the color of their skin.
Yeah, I disagree with you. I think you're going to be
day.
judged by the depth of your wallet and how long your legacy at a university is going to be. You didn't go after any of the other privilege, which is interesting to me. You're going to go after the one hand up to poor and working class minorities that is there, that one pathway. You're going to go after that wholeheartedly. But the other stuff, the legacy stuff, the wealth, that we can't talk about the green. We can talk about color all we want. Talk about color to the sky turns blue, but we can't talk about green. Can't do that, brother. We just can't.
Well, you sure do limit the faith in kids, don't you?
No, I know how this
kids working hard and getting ahead.
Yeah, and that's a nice frame. But in states that have already done this, we see what happens. Look at Michigan. Look what happened in Michigan when they limited the enrollment. The number of black students who applied, got accepted, and went through the programs all diminished. That's the reality. I'm not making that up.
Who brought this case to the Supreme Court?
Asian students.
Asian American, yes.
Yeah.
So the mere fact that you want to place all the blame on white kids.
Did I say white kids? I said rich kids. Whoa.
Yeah.
I said rich kids. This is going to make make the Lori Laughlins of the world very happy because they're not going to have schemes to get their kids into places.
Didn't they, Rick? They went to prison, didn't they?
Yeah, that's because back then that was illegal. So they don't have to do it now.
Don't stand with that either.
I don't stand with that.
Don't stand with that either. So I have trust in kids who work hard will get where they want to be. You don't.
I guess I've been on the other side of that. So I appreciate your thoughts, though. Thanks so much. Look, at the end of it, that's the simple frame. And look, I want people who are going to be able, who work hard and play by the rules to get ahead. I've always said that. I believe in that. But we see what happens. We've seen through decades what happens, and we're going to see what happens now. I mean, we're going to go through this. And in a couple of years, we're going to be able to look back and see, how did this work out and how many people did or did not make it through? Because it's the law of the land now. The court has decided. The six little dictators in robes, they made their choice. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Let's quick go to the phones. Got John and Madison online too. John, how are we doing today?
Pretty good.
What's on your mind, brother?
Well, I'm just thinking in our wonderful Wisconsin legislature here, our legislators just cut the funding from the University of Wisconsin by another $32 million. And this is, of course, our gerrymandered in almost two-thirds majority from 48% of the voters Republican legislature. This is a typical Republican mantra. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Oh, but we forgot to tell you, we're not only going to cut those bootstraps, we're going to take your sandals away.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are just unbelievable. And now they're increasing the difficulty. It already cost my son about $75,000 to go to one of the University of Wisconsin satellite schools up at Eau Claire.
Wow.
For where he graduated. It's getting to the point where people can't afford to go to schools like that even.
No, and this is my problem with all of this. I mean, the sad reality is this is going to make it easier for the very wealthy to get into the more elite, the most elite schools. It's going to make it much easier for those with deep pockets to go further. And working class kids like mine, like yours, are going to struggle. To me, it's not about white, black. It's about green. It's about money. It's about economic power. It's about affluence. To me, that's what this is about.
Yep, as there's an old saying: the rich get rich and the poor get poorer, and that's exactly the aim of the Republican Party.
Yeah, I appreciate the call, man. Thank you so much. And look, that's the reality of where we are. I mean, they know which side of the bread their butter is on. Let's go to the phones. We got Alice on line one. Alice, how are you?
Totally insane.
So what's on your mind?
So what I wanted to say is this. So once again, our little ecumenical council there on the Supreme Court are showing their true colors and making their little decisions. And, of course, they're trying to dismantle it so that no one but the wealthy can get into the colleges. But the one silver lining to the cloud is this, Rick. Seriously, have you really been impressed with some of the Ivy League graduates, like Jared Kushner and Rudy Giuliani and the Trump kids? I mean, I think they're all partying anyways. So maybe they'll all just have to get Daddy to donate more buildings or something when, But there's always that. But have a good evening.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it. No, this is, again, making my point for me. The reality is I want to be on the side of working class folks, people who are struggling. And, one of the things that I was thinking about earlier, and this idea of affluence, of living, even, an upper middle class kind of existence that gives you the ability to afford tutors and to be able to afford, people to help you, get through these tests. There's all kinds of, programs out there for test prep and all this stuff that, honestly, where I grew up, the housing project I grew up in, nobody had money for that stuff. Cupboards were bare most of the time. People were struggling to make ends meet. Nobody was getting an opportunity to go to Harvard out of our area unless you gave them a hand up. And I look at this affirmative action program as a hand up, not doing for. These are people who had grades that would get them into the school, because it's the frame that I love hearing from people is, well, they don't deserve to be there, which is ridiculous. They had grades, they had the ability to get there, only they gave them a little bit of an advantage because they wanted a racial mix. This is kind of one of those things where you look at our civil service exams, and our civil service exams have weighted points for different things. We want women to do certain jobs. We want minorities to do certain jobs. We want to give people with college educations, more points. We want to give people who served in the military more points. It's the picking and choosing that I have a problem with. It really is. Because college admission is really subjective. Once you get past the grades, okay, everyone's got a 3.7 grade point average. Fine. Everyone except George Bush, who was a C student, 2.0. Once you get past that, everything else is subjective. So why aren't we talking about any of the other things that go into that? And of course, we're not going to. Because we're supposed to be focused on the racial component, the thing that divides us, black and white. or black and white and yellow. We're supposed to be pitted against each other. And look, in a perfect world, would I love to have this right-wing meritocracy where the best and the brightest get into places? Yeah, there's part of me that says, yeah, okay. But there's also part of me that says, you know what? Working class people need a shot too. I have a professor friend who told me today, grade point averages, those are worthless. That's not going to, that tells you almost nothing on how students are going to do in a college setting. It has almost nothing to do with their success as a college student. Their drive, their interest, their ability to perform. And he said to me, the person who has the biggest challenges of all of the types of students you want to talk about are students from Appalachia. White kids from Appalachia, they had the hardest time adjusting because they want to go home. They want to be home. They, in his experience, the most homesick of all of them. So how do you overcome those barriers? How do you help people achieve in this world? I mean, this idea that everyone's Horatio Alger going to pull themselves up by the bootstraps it's a nice fantasy. When the reality is there's a ton of invisible capital behind all of us. I look at the invisible capital behind Trump, behind you name the Ivy Leaguer. Look at our Supreme Court. How many of them got into the places they got because they were great students? No, because they were legacy students, because they had money, because they had a network of people who were pushing them. And it's this little thing. This is the part that blows my mind. It's this little thing, because as I pointed out, Michael Steele pointed out, the number of black students on these campuses, minuscule. So it's not giving them a huge leg up, but it is meant to divide us. It's meant to tear us apart. But we'll see where this takes us and what policies come next. What will the Biden administration do? We will find out. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history,
The year was 1937. That was the day SWAC leader Philip Murray beat back reports that the Little Steel strike had collapsed. Even as the steel companies were championing that the strike had been broken, Murray insisted that of the 90,000 workers involved, only 20,000 had returned to work in the mills that stretched across 7 states. He added they were mostly supervisors and foremen and not production workers. Murray leveled charges against Ohio Governor Martin Davey that the Ohio National Guard was being used as company police to smash the strike. Strike leaders added that the companies were staging dummy back-to-work parades. In fact, Labor Secretary Perkins had announced that it was the government's effort at mediation that had collapsed. But the steel magnates were on the offensive and had the backing of local politicians and police. George Mike, a Union man and disabled veteran, was the latest casualty in the anti-labor war. He was killed the day before at Maltrup Steel in Beaver Falls, Ohio, as picketers clashed with deputy sheriffs. In Indiana, police rushed to plant gates at Inland Steel to guard against new battles as 20,000 strikers prepared for the imminent forced reopenings of Inland Steel and Youngstown Sheet and Tube there. Both mills remained closed for weeks. In Warren, Ohio, police issued a warrant for CIO strike leader Gus Hall and 2 other strike leaders on charges that he was the brains behind a terrorist plot to blow up strike-bound steel mills. And at Bethlehem's Cambria Works in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, 2 separate dynamitings destroyed main water supplies, causing an immediate end to an attempted back-to-work movement there. The strike was far from over. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
When you think of Americans whose music has made a lasting difference, you might think of Scott Joplin, Woody Guthrie, Maybelle Carter, Harry Belafonte, or Roger Payne. Who? I came across Payne in a June obituary reporting that he had died at age 88. Yes, I occasionally scan the obits, not out of morbid curiosity, but because these little death notices encompass our people's history, reconnecting us to common lives that had some small or surprisingly large impact. Paine's impact is still reverberating around the globe, even though few know his name. A biologist who studied moths in the 1960s, he chanced upon a technical military recording of undersea sounds that incidentally included a cacophony of baying, shrieking, mooing, squealing, and caterwauling. They were the voices of humpback whales. What others had considered noise blew my mind, said Paine, describing them as a musical chorus of exuberant, uninterrupted rivers of sound. His life's work shifted from moths to whales, then to the interdependence of all species. At the time, whales were treated by industry and governments as dull, lumbering nuisances. But Paine's musical instincts came into play, sensing that the singing of these magnificent mammals might reach the primordial soul of humans. So he collected their rhythmic, haunting melodies into a momentous 1970 recording titled Songs of the Humpback Whale. It became a huge bestseller, altered public perception, and spawned a global Save the Whales campaign, one of the most successful conservation movements ever. This is Jim Hightower saying, so without writing or performing a single musical note, this scientist produced a truly powerful serenade from nature that continues to make a difference. To connect with Roger Paine's musical work and help extend his deep understanding that all of us beings are related, contact Ocean Alliance at whale.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we've been talking about for the last couple of days, Bidenomics. Yeah, I got to tell you, love the fact that Joe Biden's coming out and taking credit for what his administration has done. I've been saying for a while, I want those big 20-foot cardboard cutouts of him pointing at stuff going, I did that. It's what we need. Democrats need to do a little bit better job of championing the things that they champion. Because if Trump had done just a tenth of what Biden's accomplished, you would think he was the savior himself coming back to earth, because they're that good at patting themselves on the back. And here to share some thoughts on the big speech yesterday in Chicago and where we go from here with Bidenomics, I've asked Emily G. to come talk with us. Emily is the Senior Vice President of Inclusive Growth at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website. Emily, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on the show.
So what'd you think of the big speech in Chicago yesterday? What'd you take from it?
So I thought it was a great speech. And as you said, it's good to see him taking credit for the monumental things that are happening and these 3 historic pieces of legislation that have been passed in the first 2 years of his term. So he is, very little since putting his name on the agenda, calling it Bidenomics. It's an agenda that invests in America. It's one that has people in mind by empowering workers and lowers costs for all of us.
Yesterday I talked about the difference between, Bidenomics now, which I think is great that you've coined something that we can grab onto, as opposed to supply side voodoo Reaganomics of the past, which got us into a lot of these messes. And I've been saying for a while, the reason that I like what Biden's doing is it's moving us away from that neoliberal kind of the trade policies, the outsourcing, those kind of things, and actually bringing stuff back.
It's a recognition that markets are not perfect. Trickle down says if you, let the money go out there by cutting taxes and cutting back on government, it will all trickle down, which it doesn't. And it also hinges on the fact that markets work. I think the private sector often has the best intents in mind, but there are things that they can't do alone. Think about the interstate highway system that we all use on a daily basis. That was a public works project, a massive public works project last century. And the investment agenda the Biden administration has put forward through these pieces of legislation rivals that in scale and scope to revitalize American manufacturing and also make sure that America is competitive in the world.
Now, my problem is, and this is where I have a problem with the administration, A lot of that investment seems to be going to places that hate him, that didn't vote for him. A lot of red states are getting this investment, and then going, well, hey, how about how about Wisconsin? How about Michigan? How about Ohio's getting the chip plant? But how about Pennsylvania? How about other states that have lost jobs in industries too? How about we do some of that here?
So there are investment projects happening all over America. In fact, my colleagues and I at the Center for American Progress have a tracker that looks at both the public awards and the private investments. And to date, things are still ticking up, but we have 60,575 different investments that are happening all over the country, literally in every state. You mentioned Michigan. We actually did have looked at, taken a closer look at a few projects in Michigan. One of which is the Ford Blue Oval Battery Park project, $3.5 billion that Ford has committed to building EV batteries, building a factory from the ground up. It is not yet guaranteed to be a union plant. They do have a deal for a card check with UAW, but so I think there's still work to be done there. But I think there is potential to create union jobs where there previously none. Another example, if I can, is there is a electric bus factory. Bluebird, the school bus company, is building electric school buses, which is cleaner, so also better for kids. To not breathe in carbon emissions, and which is associated with asthma. There's a plant down in Georgia that recently unionized in a territory that's traditionally been very hostile to unions. Yeah. And so I think there's reason to hope that by with these investments and giving workers more skills and more job security, we can also improve unionization across the country.
No, I mean, look, we did a tour back in October, and we went to a lot of places that used to have a manufacturing plant in the town. That was their identity. It was the driver of their economy, and those places are struggling. And I argue that's what led to getting us Donald Trump. That people, were frustrated. They didn't think people were listening. Jobs weren't coming back. The fact that Biden is doing this, and has been doing it, I think is great. But I also think you got to go out there and you got to sell this. Part of these investments is the sales that come along with it. That do it, tell people you did it, and then tell them you did it again, and then show them you did it. This I think the administration needs to be doing more of.
And I think that's what they're doing on this tour that essentially, the second round tour that essentially launched with that speech in Chicago where you referred to. It's helping everybody understand that what they're seeing in terms of new roads and lead pipes being replaced with to give people cleaner drinking water. These electric vehicle plants, changes that we're seeing to invest in solar and wind and renewable energy. These are not isolated things, but part of a cohesive strategy to build a greener economy and to revitalize American manufacturing.
I'm sure you saw the tweets that went out from the dumbest guy in the U.S. Senate, Tommy Tuberville, and also John Cronin, the senator from Texas, basically, saying, "Hey, look how wonderful this investment in broadband is. Thank goodness we've got this stuff." And they voted against it. So I keep looking at the majority of Republicans who voted against these investments. I think it's important to point them out and call them out as well.
Oh, for sure. And I think it also just shows you how popular this stuff is. People want economic security. People want jobs, and this agenda will deliver.
So let me ask you this, because part of the argument against doing this is all of this money that was being spent, all this money that's being invested is causing our inflation. It's Biden-flation, I'm told. Any response to that?
Yes, a couple of things. One is if you look at the inflation numbers, the most recent data we have are for May. We are down, and we're also on a downward trend in terms of inflation. So inflation is actually settling down. The U.S. is, this has been a global problem. There are some global pressures, including Russia's war in Ukraine, driving up energy prices, particularly in Europe. But the U.S. has got much lower annualized inflation than Germany and the U.K. and other developed countries. And it's starting to tick downwards. Grocery prices are coming down, and so inflation is getting under control. The other thing I'll point out too is that part of the reason we're doing this investment is to, for the long run, give the U.S. greater protection, greater stability against, external forces that can drive up prices, including things like improving America's energy independence by increasing wind and solar here at home, so we're not dependent on autocratic nations for oil and gas. It's also about making more things here in America and so-called friendshoring, making sure that our supply chains are not dependent on the whims of, say, China, which is where we saw some shortages during the pandemic, not only for masks and such, but also for the chips that we need to make automobiles.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the pandemic woke a lot of people up to the reality of just how dependent we are on the rest of the world. And you go back and you think about the World War II era. The reason we were able to prevail there is we had massive production capacities. We were able to turn our factories into and on a almost on a dime into war production. We don't have those factories anymore because we drove through a lot of places where those factories used to be, and they're crumbling.
Yes, and this is what's exciting about this is it's not just public money going out into these projects. It's creating an environment in which the private sector, be it semiconductor plants, automobile manufacturers, energy and power plants, people are, there's private sector money being crowded in, spurred by the tax credits and the environment that rewards making things here at home.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of this, the direction I think we're heading is good. I like the fact that we're, again, reshoring manufacturing, by American provisions. That stuff's important to me, and I think important to working people, especially the Buy American part of this. I mean, if we're going to rebuild roads and bridges, it should be done with concrete that was produced here, steel that was produced here. Not because I'm a nationalist and I think we're better than them, because we need an economy. People need jobs. There's a reverberation effect every time we spend $1 on infrastructure that has to go through the rest of the economy. It just seems smart to me that you would want to have that snowball effect in your local economy.
Absolutely. And it's also about national security too. You want to be able to have, not be reliant on countries that may not be friendly to the U.S. For crucial things like steel and semiconductors.
So what are we looking forward into the next? I know that the administration's doing their tour. We're going to highlight some things over the next couple of days and weeks. What are we looking down at?
So I think we are just at the beginning. There are three big pieces of legislation that passed in the last couple of years. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the Chips and Science Act, which as the name suggests is about semiconductors, but also about investing in workers' skills. And the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the biggest piece of climate legislation ever passed. Those are just what sets everything in motion. Now what happens is you have these investment commitments, public works projects announced by state and local government, large, the order of $1 billion investments announced by private companies to train workers and build new plants. So I think we are just at the dawn of the potential here. I think we will, we've already seen a dramatic increase in construction jobs, and eventually that will turn into jobs in manufacturing, and other things as these plants actually come online later.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Emily G. Emily is the Senior Vice President of Inclusive Growth at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website if you want to check out the work that they do here. Now, I'm not a huge Elon Musk fan by any stretch of the imagination, but recently I saw a video of him saying, look, we need to get to renewable energies and quickly. Because it's, in his view, it's entirely possible for us to get off of the dirty stuff and to move to renewables. Do you think we're moving in the right direction? Do you think we're moving quick enough? I haven't seen it yet, so I'm curious what you're seeing and maybe help us along to see what maybe is coming.
So I think doing it quick is important. Doing it well is also important. I don't think those things are different. I sometimes hear people play this off as a trade-off, but I think doing it well is in many ways the same as doing it quick. So let me give you one example. If you have an electric vehicle, especially out west where I'm from, it can be a fair distance between charging stations. And so your choice to buy an electric vehicle will depend on whether you think you're going to get stranded because you can't find an operational charging station. And so getting consumer demand up, and therefore getting these companies to want to invest in supplying requires making sure that we have an environment in which people want to consume this stuff. So it is things like making sure that charging infrastructure is compatible. Every maker has its own plug, and then that limits the number of charging stations I might be able to use with my EV. And so there is a lot of role for government to help coordinate, to make and shape markets to make sure that companies are making things that consumers want, and that
yeah, I mean, if you're going to have the infrastructure, it's got to be usable.
Yes. I mean, another example is the power grid, right? If you don't have the grid to support car dealers and manufacturing plants, then you don't have an environment that's going to be ready to go for those new vehicles.
You could say this one of two ways. We got a long way to go, or you can go, we got a long way to go, and it's good because there's going to be jobs, there's going to be opportunities, there's going to be all this stuff. The future is bright. Or you can look at it as, we're never going to get there. I want to believe we're going to take this on, because I still think we're a country who can do big things, even as divided as we seem to be. And this is one of those things I'm hoping we can do. But Emily, I appreciate you taking some time, sharing some thoughts. Thanks so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Emily G. She is the Senior Vice President of Inclusive Growth there at the Center for American Progress. Check out their website, AmericanProgress.org. We're going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day that American folklorist Archie Green was born in Winnipeg, Canada. His father was a Ukrainian refugee who had fought in the 1905 Russian Revolution. As a young boy, his family moved to Los Angeles. There, he enjoyed listening to cowboy songs on the radio. Archie grew up to become a shipwright and a carpenter, but he never forgot those cowboy songs. At the age of 40, he returned to college at the University of Illinois to study labor history. He wanted to learn about the songs and the stories at the heart of the U.S. labor movement. He was interested in what he dubbed labor lore, the folklore of working people. For 7 years, Archie led the effort to get Congress to pass the American Folklife Preservation Act. Finally, in 1976, Congress unanimously supported the act. The act allowed for the founding of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. The center helps to collect the stories of the working class. Archie wrote books and essays about workers, including miners, tinsmiths, millwrights, and the Sailors Union of the Pacific. In 2007, he helped to edit the Big Red Songbook. The book includes the lyrics of nearly 200 labor songs. These songs had been included in various editions of the Little Red Songbooks published by the Industrial Workers of the World between 1909 and 1973. Archie Green understood that workers' stories deserved to be remembered and told. He spent 5 decades as a scholar and advocate for these stories. His work has helped to preserve the record of working class life in America for generations to come.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So I love this story. The U.S. Department of Labor, they are suing this National Customer Service. And, I've gotten some flack for my belief that we need to rein in this independent contractor, this gig economy kind of stuff, that employees should be employees and they should be treated as such, paid as such, and taxed, all of that. the unemployment, the workers' comp, the state and local taxes, all that stuff as an employee. And I've said, look, there are places for independent contractors. You're an electrician, you do jobs, one house to the next, whatever. You're truly an independent contractor because you control your own work, you control your time. You're not doing a job that someone would normally be doing, all of that. This story caught my attention because this Florida-based customer service provider, the people who annoyingly call you on the phone, and whatever, or you end up calling them, and I guess they did work for Barnes and Nobles, Comcast, Disney, Walgreens. So if you called when I called Comcast to check how bad my internet is, I probably may have talked to one of these people. And what they did in Florida is they made it so all of the people who you're calling and talking to on the phone as customer service reps, they made them all independent contractors, all gig workers. In fact, what the Office of Solicitor lawsuit says is that they expected workers to pay for mandatory training while attending courses offered through the company's proprietary software. So they're saying, you're going to have to come to school. You're going to have to pay for school. Our school and our software and our stuff, you're going to have to pay for all this. And oh, by the way, we're going to make you do multiple weeks of this, and we're not going to pay you anything. You're going to come to school, pay us, and whereas in the past, we would hire you, we would train you to do the job, you'd be an employee, you'd get health care and retirement and wages and all that. No, that's all gone. You're now your own boss. They required all of these people to set up their own limited liability corporations or join existing corporations so that for the purpose of getting around labor laws. Also made them sign arbitration agreements. So even if you wanted to sue them under the Fair Labor Standards Act for not paying minimum wage or overtime or anything, can't take them to court because you signed this arbitration agreement. And you go, well, how many people is it? They're talking 22,000 workers, 22,000 people they conned into signing up to be their own boss. You're going to be your own boss. You're going to make huge money. And, it reminds me of, some of the trucking things that I remember years ago. I remember a guy worked for MS Carriers. I don't even think they're in business anymore. But it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. We're at a little truck stop, and it's just a handful of people around. And this guy's feeding his credit card and his ATM cards into the machine. Nothing coming out. And he's frustrated and he's angry and he's ticked off because he can't get a sandwich. So I offer to buy him a coffee and a sandwich because he looked distressed. I help a brother out. I'm a union organizer, so it opens up the door to to start talking to people and have conversations. And he tells me this story of how he's going to be his own boss. He's the truck he's got out there, he's leasing. In 7 years, it's going to be all his. Completely free and clear. He just has to work for, at the time, 23 cents a mile. Whereas as a union driver, I was making 51 cents a mile. So he was making less than half. I mean, barely able to get by. And the money that they were supposed to pay him never really got into his paycheck. He had to fight for it all the time. And they never gave him enough fuel. And it was a whole debacle, but he was his own boss. They told him where he had to go, how he had to get there, when he had to get there, what clothes he had to wear, but he's his own boss. And at the end of this conversation, as we're going through this, I ended up breaking his heart, and I didn't mean to. I don't mean to be Debbie Downer all the time, but the reality is in the trucking industry, you own a truck for 7 years, you're going to have over 1 million miles, and it's going to have to go through a ton of rebuilds and maintenance and all kinds of stuff that the company doesn't want to deal with. So you basically worked for half of what you should have worked for, and you've got a piece of garbage that they ended up dumping on you in the aftermath because they weren't going to want to do all the work that had to be done. It was a great scheme for the company. And we see this model being played out time and time again, where working people are the ones who continually shoulder the burden and the risk. Because we all want to be independent. We all want to have a job that we love doing and that gives us flexibility to spend time with our families and vacation. We want that infomercial at 2 a.m. Sad reality is somebody's getting rich. It's not you. Somebody's lining their pockets. It's not these workers who had to show up, go through a training program, not just unpaid, but had to pay for their training, and then set up a corporation to shield the real company from any liability, insurance or otherwise. It's quite a racket. And this is what I've been saying for a while, why I'm against a lot of the gig stuff. Because we now know that, eventually it's going to be warehouse work. It's, you name it. It's going to be whatever. We're all going to be little LLCs, and we're all going to have to get out there and hump for our supper. Now, there's some who think that's a great idea. As a union guy, I'm like, look, corporate America wants to make profit off our back. We're going to make some of that back. We're going to do well. But we're in a moment where this stuff is being sold to us as, whoa, it's going to be great. It's the greatest thing ever. This guy that I met, he really believed, until I broke his heart, that he was living the dream, that he was working towards something, that something was going to break for him. It was tough now because he was pulling himself up by the bootstraps. He was doing the hard work. He was putting in the hours, putting in the time, doing the miles. I think about that guy quite often, because I wonder what eventually happened to him, because MS Carriers went out of business a short time. I believe it was a short time after that. And I wonder what happened to the truck. I wonder what happened to him. Because this is a guy who worked hard. I want that guy to succeed. I want him to do well. I want every person who's willing to strap on a set of boots and get out there and do an honest day's labor. I want them to do well. We should all want that. But these gimmicks time and time again end up sticking it to the working person and benefiting, the guy at the top. And we're heading towards an era, I'm telling you right now, with all the AI, with all the stuff that's coming, we're heading towards an era where this is going to get more prevalent. So it's time, politically, to start talking about this. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcasts, you will find ours. Back after this.
Canada's wildfire season is now officially the worst ever recorded.
Canada's fires shatter records, sending smoky air back to the U.S. and to Europe. Intensifying rainstorms pose hidden flood risk across U.S. Plus,
to remove PFAS from public water systems across the country is an enormously expensive endeavor.
3M settles another lawsuit over forever chemicals in municipal drinking water systems.
All of those toxic stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
They want to take away your washing machines and your dryers.
Nope, they don't.
They don't want to give you any water for the washing machine.
Also a lie. This is your Green News Report. Hey, sorry that we got to fire up the Donald Trump fact-checking again, but so be it. What do you have for us today, Desi Doyen?
Well, smoky summers may be our new normal in the U.S. Air quality is again plummeting for millions of Americans, this time in the upper Midwest and Northeast, due to smoke from Canadian wildfires. This week, Chicago, Milwaukee, and Detroit vied for the city with the worst air quality in the world. The Canadian smoke has even crossed the Atlantic Ocean to hit the UK and Spain. Officials in Canada say 2023 is officially Canada's biggest fire season in modern history, with fires coast to coast, driven by unusually hot and dry weather. And it's not even peak fire season yet. Canada's wildfire emissions are also breaking records. Europe's climate service Copernicus reports that over the last 20 years, Canada's carbon emissions from wildfires have increased along with the land area burned. This year, Canada's fires have released 85% of its annual average greenhouse emissions. That's roughly equivalent to Indonesia's annual carbon emissions from burning fossil fuels. Abundant scientific evidence shows human-caused climate change is intensifying wildfires, creating a self-reinforcing feedback loop as the fires send more climate warming emissions into the atmosphere, in turn worsening global warming and wildfire conditions.
Yeah, but think about all the money that Canada's made from all that dirty tar sands oil.
Good point. In Texas, the relentless, record-shattering heat wave has sent hundreds of people to emergency rooms and killed at least 13, including in the state's prisons, which mostly have no air conditioning.
Wow.
Extreme heat now kills more people in the United States than any other weather event, according to federal data. Especially dangerous are multiple consecutive days of extreme heat and warm overnights that don't allow our bodies to cool down. A recent Climate Central analysis projects that today's record highs will be average summer temperatures by 2050, with the South forecast to see 2 full months over 100 degrees.
And Texas has seen triple-digit temperatures now in its third week.
A different study warns that intensifying rainstorms pose hidden flood risks across the U.S. The First Street Foundation finds that rainstorms are capable of dumping significantly more water than federal data indicates in some regions. That means data used to set design standards for new infrastructure is outdated and understates the risk of extreme rain and flood events, particularly in the Northeast and along the Gulf Coast. Climate change has increased the intensity and frequency of severe rainstorms in recent decades, and that is raising the risk of U.S. flood control failure. In accountability news, Minnesota-based chemical giant 3M will pay more than $10 billion to settle a lawsuit alleging that its toxic PFAS chemicals contaminated U.S. public drinking water systems. It's the latest among several cases pending against the company. PFAS chemicals are used in firefighting foam, non-stick applications, and a host of consumer products, and are linked to cancers and birth defects. They're called forever chemicals because they don't break down in the environment and are incredibly costly to remove, according to Scott Summey, one of the attorneys representing the municipalities that sued.
These water systems have to install expensive water treatment in order to remove the chemicals. This settlement, being the largest drinking water settlement in American history, will go a long way.
I guess they thought there'd be forever profits from those forever chemicals.
Finally, some good news. The Biden administration proposed new rules to restore protections to the Endangered Species Act that had been rolled back by disgraced former President Donald Trump. The new proposed rules will make it easier to protect wildlife from climate disruptions and other threats, make it harder to remove a species from the endangered list, and eliminates a Trump-era policy that allowed regulators to consider economic issues like lost profits for the oil and gas industry when deciding whether a species deserves protections.
Good. We will take what we can get. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So just when you thought more versus whatever was gone because of the gerrymandering case, and good on the Supreme Court on this one, they got this right. Yeah, you know what? Blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. But there's another Moore case coming up. This one, I think just as bad. It seems, what is it with Moore? They want more. But there's a case evidently that has been filed, Moore versus the U.S., that could well, could have major implications, brought by the folks at the Competitive Enterprise Institute and the Baker Hostetler on behalf of Kathleen and Charles Moore. They're a married couple who they don't want to pay taxes. They don't want to pay taxes. They think they more for them. And here to share some thoughts on what this competitive enterprise lawsuit could bring us and what it could mean for taxpayers, what it could mean for the coffers, and what it could mean for the very wealthy. I've asked our good friend Morris Pearl to come talk with us. Morris is the chair of the Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org, the website. Morris, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Great to be in your show.
So there's this lawsuit. I'm sure you've seen this. So as a rich guy, you gotta be okay with this. This is more for you, man.
It could be. It could be. One of the basic ideas of our tax code is when you make money, you pay a percentage of that in taxes. And most of your listeners understand that. They see on every pay stub a deduction for taxes. But somebody like me, I make investment income, or say somebody's like a partner in a law firm and their law firm makes money and stuff like that. There's lots of ways to make money without actually getting a paycheck that has a deduction for taxes. And the law used to be that if you had an investment in a foreign country, like say you were a partner in a partnership in Canada or something, or some other country, then you only pay taxes when you actually receive the money. And they changed that in 2017 with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in order to offset lower taxes. They say if you're making profits from a business, even if it's not in this country, you have to pay taxes on that too. However, these guys didn't like that. And they especially didn't like having to pay tax on their accumulated profits in previous years that they thought would be deferred forever, according to them. And they're suing. They only paid the government $14,000 back in 2018, and then they sued to get it back, saying this is unconstitutional.
So 14 grand, they're going to pay all the legal fees and all of the tens of thousands of dollars that have to come in legal fees to get 14 grand back? I don't see the return on investment.
I think the American Enterprise Institute is getting a return on their investment.
Oh, the conservative think tank.
Yeah, I think they have some donors who are planning to save millions or billions if the Supreme Court decides in favor of the Moores on this one.
Oh, okay. So they're taking a sympathetic couple. They're going to put them out as the showpiece, but really behind the scenes, this is big money.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, liberals do that too.
Sure.
Sometimes you get rich donors backing lawsuits. There's a lawsuit against the case Trump lost. They had to pay $5 million to Jean Carroll. There were rich donors backing that one too. Not Jean Carroll was not paying those legal fees.
Right.
I assure you. So that in itself is okay. And yeah, it's a test case. And yeah, maybe they're a sympathetic couple from the state of Washington, whatever. But the basic principle is they don't want to pay any taxes. Currently, if you own a business, it might be a corporation, and then the corporation pays taxes every single year. Or it could be a partnership or a few other things, what they call a pass-through entity, like typically lawyers would form a partnership. And then they would divide up the profits and tell each member of the partnership, you have to pay taxes on your share of the profits, irregardless of whether you got in cash or not. The partnership might have used all of its profits to redecorate the office or something, but still the partners had to pay tax on those profits. I mean, these guys say that isn't fair. That isn't income. We never got it in cash. It's just still in our business. That's in a business bank account, not our personal bank account. And so they're arguing that it's not income. They're also arguing it's unfair, it's retroactive, since they already made the money before the law was changed. And both of those things are ridiculous arguments. The Supreme Court has ruled time and time again that you can be charged taxes on profits your business makes, even if that money stays in the business. That's come up in lots of different contexts, not just lawyers' partnerships,
Right.
but lots of different businesses, or we call pass-through entities.
Right, but Morris, we've got a new Supreme Court. We've got a Supreme Court that sides on the side of corporations overwhelmingly. We've got a Supreme Court that should wear NASCAR robes.
That is sadly true. That is sadly true, and I don't know how they're going to decide. They might very well overrule all kinds of precedents going back almost 100 years and rule that lots of taxes we now charge are unconstitutional. They might rule the same as the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled, that yes, this is long decided that this is the way taxes work, and sorry, Moors, but you have to pay your fair share. I mean, they might come up with some other in-between kind of a thing too, I suppose.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If they took the case, if the lower court, has this ruling that, hey, tough luck, this is how it's always been, this is how it's going to be, if that's the case, and they're taking this, it seems to me that and I know you only need 4 justices to take a case, but it seems to me there's interest on, with our 9 little robed dictators.
Well, there's certainly interest. There's certainly a group of justices who basically don't think we should do stuff collectively. They're against collective labor agreements, they're against collective everything, and they're certainly against government. So they want to read the rules very narrowly of what the government is allowed to do. And, then the 19th Amendment about income taxes, well, income from any source derived is what it says. So hopefully that includes money made in a corporation you own that's in a foreign country. But yeah, I don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do. I'm hoping they don't, just decide that investors don't have to pay taxes, but they might.
I bring this up because, recently I'm sure you've seen, as everyone else has, Clarence Thomas has got some interesting problems. You had, Justice Alito, who came out with his prebuttal about, I took the Alaska trip. That was $1,000 a day and $100,000 flight. But hey, the seat was going to be empty anyway. So I was doing them a favor by going. There seems to be some very cozy relationships with some very wealthy people. It seems like, now I'm not saying there's a quid pro quo here. I'm not saying that they're going to do this because, they got these trips, but they're primed. I mean, they're in that world. It just seems to me, this is where we're going to go.
Yeah. I mean, the same way that you kind of know what it's like to be a truck driver. And if something about truck driving comes up, you understand, the challenges of being a long haul driver and can kind of sympathize with them. Well, these guys know what it's like to be a rich investor who doesn't like to pay taxes and sympathize with them.
Right.
And that's sad. It really is.
So for folks out there who are going like, I hate paying taxes. And look, most of my buddies hate paying taxes. Most people I know hate paying taxes. What does this country look like without a tax base?
Well, let me tell you a secret. I don't like paying taxes either. I don't like to pay taxes. I'm not sure about my wife. She's just an accountant, so maybe she does. But the same way, I also don't like to pay the common charges to my apartment. I don't like to pay the annual dues for the club that I'm in. But I want to have a nice club where I can meet with people and have a fancy lunch once in a while. And I want to live in this fancy apartment on Park Avenue. And I want to have a country where I can, invest money and create businesses, and my children and granddaughter can grow up and have the opportunities that I had. And so I pay for all those things. I pay the common charges in the apartment, I pay the club dues, and I pay my taxes. And that's how it works. There's a price for society. That's what Oliver Wendell Holmes said. So I don't like to pay taxes. I don't want to pay taxes, but I pay them because I want to be in a system where everyone pays some taxes and we have enough money in the Commonwealth to pay for stuff.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Morris Pearl. Morris is the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org, their website, if you want to take a look at the incredible work that they do. Now, you are out there on the ground. Taxes seems to be your thing. You're out on the ground in North Carolina and Wisconsin, coming to Pennsylvania, and doing an online program to educate people about taxes. Because, look, as you said, nobody likes to pay them, but understanding what they're good for, understanding, the things that we need, roads, bridges, a military, a safety net to ensure that we don't have abject poverty and people dying on the streets. There are things that we want and need as a society, and this is how it's paid for. So I think having the education and having the kind of program that you guys are doing with the Great Economy Project is incredibly important.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. We're hoping it works. We're hoping these guys learn that they're paying taxes that are deducted from their paychecks every single week, and other people are investors and they just are not. And it's not fair. So they may or may not vote for one party or the other, but I think they're going to call their representatives and tell them they want a more fair tax system. Or they might have different representatives, who knows? But that's what we're getting at, is just educating people about how the system works and how it's a lot more fair for some people than other people, and it could be improved. And we need legislators in Washington and your state capital, all of the state capitals, who want to make some improvements and make it more fair for everyone. And I'm working on it.
No, you guys are doing great work, and because I think it's important to kind of paint a picture of, without a tax base, without the investments that are happening, and I think the Biden administration is doing a great job of investing in the things that we need, the infrastructure that we need, reshoring manufacturing, doing the stuff that needs to get done. But in the absence of that, we become a crumbling society of chaos. And I think once you get to that bottom line, I think people then turn around and go, maybe we don't want that for the future.
Well, they tried that in South Africa when I was a teenager. It did not end well for the rich people or the poor people either, for that matter. We don't want America to end up that way. And I'm trying to do something about it. And we're trying to make it more fair now, so we don't have the whole thing blow up with, anarchy sometime in the future.
I got an email from Brad. Brad asks, what was it like before the Trump tax code changes? How was this money taxed in the past? Is this something new that Trump brought on? I'm curious, can you talk to that a little bit? What was it like before the 2017 law?
This particular thing is different. If you own a substantial part, meaning more than 10% of a company in a foreign country, under the old law, you only pay taxes if you receive the money in cash. They sent you a check, like a dividend or something, or you sold it. Under the new law, you have to pay taxes on your share of the profits, your percentage of the profits every single year. And in 2018, you had to pay taxes on the accumulated money from previous years that you never paid tax on before. And you have like a 30-year time period in which to do that. So they're not trying to stick you all at once in 1 year. That's what they're objecting to, is the fact that in 2018, they had to pay taxes on money that had been profits in their company in years earlier. And they thought they could have it deferred forever as long as they never brought the money into the United States. And they relied upon that, they say. They do. And the new law is that in 2018, they had to pay taxes on all the profits that their company made, their share of all the profits their company made up to 2017. And then going forward, every year they have to pay taxes on the money they earned that year. And they have a long time to do the catch up for that 1 year. So that's what they were objecting to, was A, having to pay tax on money that was never brought into the United States, that was still in their company bank accounts in a foreign country, and two, that it was retroactive. And both of those things are long settled laws.
Yeah.
There's lots of taxes. Lots of times they change the rules, and lots of times where you're charged money on profits you make, even though the money is still in a company checking account or something. not your own personal checking account.
Now, the fact that you said it was decided law makes me go, uh-oh, here we go again, turning decided law, stare decisis, on its head. But this gives us something to look forward to, I guess, next year, right? This session's over. We'll have next summer to look forward how this is going to play out.
Yeah, it'll be it'll be in the late fall or winter next year when they'll argue the case, and then a year from now we'll find out.
We'll find out. Morris, as always, I appreciate the time and the insight. Look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you, Rick. Great to talk to you. Yep, bye-bye.
Our good friend Morris Pearl. Make sure you check out their website, patrioticmillionaires.org. Going to take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people have the talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I know taxes are sexy, aren't they? There's nothing gets you excited like a good tax talk. But the reality is that this is how we fund the things that we need. This is how we're going to move forward in this country and leave something for our children and our grandchildren. And ensuring another way for rich people to evade taxes is one of those things that makes me kind of angry. Especially when you have these big money groups who are spending huge amounts of cash to get 14 grand for this couple. And understand, that's the little tip of the iceberg. It makes you go, oh, it's only 14 grand. What's the big deal? No. The reason the Competitive Enterprise Institute is behind it, the reason one of these fancy law firms is behind it and throwing huge amounts of lawyerly money away, they know that the pot of gold is at the end of that rainbow. They know what this means for the people who are actually investing in this. And we don't get to know who they are. And that's part of my problem with how our legal system works. And I know Morris said, it's on both sides. Yeah, it is. And I don't think it's right. But again, it comes back to this moment where as working people, you and me, every paycheck we get, it's right there on the line. They take it out. And, everyone, every week, I hear my buddies every week, complaining, look at this, look at what they took out of here. And when you work overtime, it's even more. They make sure that they keep pushing it into working people. And how many tax breaks did working people get under the Trump's tax code? Oh, yeah, almost nothing. And they expire. Did you know that? What crumbs that Trump threw to the working class expires? But those corporate tax cuts, oh boy, those are forever. Them's permanent. Because, smart people know what to do with the money, I guess. That's the argument, isn't it? They're the smart people. They know what to do with it. And look, as I've said a million times, our system is set up and operates exactly as it's supposed to. It is working perfectly. for the people who control massive amounts of wealth. And as Morris points out, look, we don't want to live in a country where we're not investing in the future of our nation. We don't want to live in a country where the roads are worse than they are now, where infrastructure is crumbling worse than it is now, where we have chaos in the streets. And this is why, as I've been saying, I think Biden is doing some really smart stuff. Bringing jobs back, giving people hope and opportunity. That's how you move this country in a positive direction. I know I get hit every day. There's the crime-riddled cities. Yeah, there's some crime problems. There are, because there's desperation out there. How do we address that? Austerity, not the answer. Investment in the future technologies, investment in our infrastructure, that's a way to go forward. So I look at this moment, and I look at the work that Morris and his group are doing. Taking off the red hat and the blue hat and talking about the green. I still love Rupert Murdoch. Rupert was right. It's not about red or blue. It's about green. It's always about money. It's always about the war between capital and labor. That's always been what it is. Take whatever issue it is. And instead of focusing on right, left, or Democrat, Republican, give it a turn. It's up, down. That's the reality. Always up, down. This affirmative action thing, for me, again, comes back down to the fact that this is going to make it easier for wealthy kids to get into college, into these elite colleges. It's not going to be, there's the meritocracy that we want to believe exists doesn't. I talked to a couple of college professors today who go and do this stuff. The admissions process is really subjective. And if you don't have the kind of affluent background, if you don't have the money to help, fill out the application and write your essays, and you don't have the ability to do all of the extracurriculars because you got to get a part-time job at night to ensure that you can put food on the table. There are barriers there that nobody wants to talk about. Nobody. But they're there. The invisible capital that we all want to ignore. I come back to George W. Bush did not get into the University of Texas, but he got into Yale and Harvard. I know the University of Texas is an esteemed university. It's not on the level of Yale and Harvard. Now here's the thing: if you're in Texas, them's probably fighting words. But for the rest of the nation, it is what it is. And somehow a C student, he got right in. And stayed right in. Why? Because he had the money. The legacy got him in, the cash kept him. Yeah, I want to believe that the content of your character and your ability to succeed should drive us. Absolutely. But there are some who do need a hand. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day that American folklorist Archie Green was born in Winnipeg, Canada. His father was a Ukrainian refugee who had fought in the 1905 Russian Revolution. As a young boy, his family moved to Los Angeles. There, he enjoyed listening to cowboy songs on the radio. Archie grew up to become a shipwright and a carpenter, but he never forgot those cowboy songs. At the age of 40, he returned to college at the University of Illinois to study labor history. He wanted to learn about the songs and the stories at the heart of the U.S. labor movement. He was interested in what he dubbed labor lore, the folklore of working people. For 7 years, Archie led the effort to get Congress to pass the American Folklife Preservation Act. Finally, in 1976, Congress unanimously supported the act. The act allowed for the founding of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. The center helps to collect the stories of the working class.
Archie wrote books and essays about workers, including miners, tinsmiths, millwrights, and the Sailors Union of the Pacific. In 2007, he helped to edit the Big Red Songbook. The book includes the lyrics of nearly 200 labor songs. These songs had been included in various editions of the Little Red Songbooks published by the industrial workers of the world between 1909 and 1973. Archie Green understood that workers' stories deserved to be remembered and told. He spent 5 decades as a scholar and advocate for these stories. His work has helped to preserve the record of working-class life in America for generations to come.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
When you think of Americans whose music has made a lasting difference, you might think of Scott Joplin, Woody Guthrie, Maybelle Carter, Harry Belafonte, or Roger Payne. Who? I came across Payne in a June obituary reporting that he had died at age 88. Yes, I occasionally scan the obits, not out of morbid curiosity, but because these little death notices encompass our people's history, reconnecting us to common lives that had some small or surprisingly large impact. Payne's impact is still reverberating around the globe, even though few know his name. A biologist who studied moths in the 1960s, he chanced upon a technical military recording of undersea sounds that incidentally included a cacophony of baying, shrieking, mooing, squealing, and caterwauling. They were the voices of humpback whales. What others had considered noise blew my mind, said Payne, describing them as a musical chorus of exuberant, uninterrupted rivers of sound. His life's work shifted from moths to whales, then to the interdependence of all species. At the time, whales were treated by industry and governments as dull, lumbering nuisances. But Payne's musical instincts came into play, sensing that the singing of these magnificent mammals might reach the primordial soul of humans. So he collected their rhythmic, haunting melodies into a momentous 1970 recording titled Songs of a Humpback Whale. It became a huge bestseller, altered public perception, and spawned a global Save the Whales campaign, one of the most successful conservation movements ever. This is Jim Hightower saying, so without writing or performing a single musical note, this scientist produced a truly powerful serenade from nature that continues to make a difference. To connect with Roger Payne's musical work and help extend his deep understanding that all of us beings are related, contact Ocean Alliance at whale.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you may remember me talking about the Texas Death Star bill. It's the mother of all preemption laws. It says that, basically if you're a city, a town, a borough, a hamlet in Texas, you can do nothing legislatively that the state prevents. You can't raise minimum wage, can't have better working conditions, you can't have paid sick days, you can't have breaks during heat. You can't do any of that stuff. Nothing for you. And look, we've seen these preemption laws pop up all over the place. In my state of Pennsylvania, the last time we passed a minimum wage increase, that would have been 2006, $7.15, nothing in between. And they said, sorry, the only way we're gonna pass this is if Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Allentown, you can't raise it above this. This is a state minimum wage. No one can do anything else. And look, to get Republican votes, they had to agree. And what we've had a stagnant minimum wage ever since. But these preemption laws stop local ability to make your conditions better. Now remember, our Republican friends love to tell us how much they love local, want to get big government off their backs. But they don't seem to mind using big government to stifle people's ability to make changes. Democracy stuff. So this Death Star bill, this preemption bill, we had talked about not too long ago, went into effect, which ended in, I think it was Houston and Austin. the ability of localities to have mandate breaks during certain heat-related times when temperatures rise to a certain degree. Their mandatory breaks go into effect. Now you go, but Rick, what employer would do that to their workers? What employer would not allow people to have breaks? Trust me, they're out there. And what we saw a postal worker who dropped, doing the job because of the heat. Now we see this story that inmates in Texas prisons are now dying. In fact, they've had at least 9 inmates die. Two men in their 30s have died of heart attacks and other heat-related illnesses. And what they're saying is it's the lack of air conditioning in these prisons. And I know. What do you think? These are country clubs? Yeah, I got to tell you, when temperatures get in the Texas heat, way the heck up there, yeah, if you're going to take control of someone's person, you've got to make sure that they don't die. I think that's if we're going to make a bare minimum, not dying, the bare minimum, not letting people have heat-related illnesses that kill them, kind of a start. Now, the weird thing is evidently it's been 11 years since the last death in the state of Texas that in the prisons that have been heat-related. I don't know. Could this Death Star bill have something to do with it? Or could it just be the reality is our Republican friends are getting much more cruel? And as I say before, the cruelty is always the point. The destroyer party is always about inflicting the most pain and suffering. And what's interesting is, you have the January 6 criminals who have been whining like oh my gosh, the prisons are bad. The food is bad. We're not respected. Yeah. What's always amazing to me is I guarantee every one of those people who are whining and complaining because they got locked up and have found out, there's that saying, mess around and find out. Well, they found out how bad prison is. They can't go, oh, they're like country clubs with swimming pools and weight rooms and they get to watch colored TV all day. No. Some of these places are really freaking bad. And now they're finding out. So instead of going, hey, how do we make this better? As most prisoners do, I've got friends who have gone to prison and they come out as hyper liberal. We need to really do some stuff. Not our MAGA friends, no. But what's weird is the Texas State House, according to this report that I was reading, the Texas State House had passed a bill not too long ago that agreed to spend some $545 million over 2 phases of a 4-phase plan to put air conditioning in all of the state prisons by 2031. But the Senate said, just like everywhere, the Senate, where progress goes to die, no, they trashed that. The final budget, which I guess goes into effect in September, will instead give the Texas Department of Criminal Justice $85 million for what they're calling additional deferred projects. Now, that may be air conditioning, that may just be patching walls. Who knows? But it's not the $545 million that the House had said, hey, we need to take care of these people. And look, we're heading into a moment. I've said before, I'm not a climate scientist. Don't pretend to be. Don't pretend to know all of the answers on the climate issue. But when I hear someone say, look, things are bad, I pay attention, because I respect smart people. I know we're in a moment in this country where, where ignorance is bliss. I know we're in a moment where, we want to mock the intelligence of others, but I'm looking at this meteorologist. This guy, his name's Jeff Berdelli. He is the chief meteorologist and a climate scientist, a climate specialist down in Tampa, Florida. And he says, look, in my 3-decade-long career being a weather forecaster, I have never observed so many of Earth's vital signs blinking red. Meteorologists and climate scientists all around the world are in awe by the simultaneous, literal, off-the-charts records being broken. And he said, look, yes, it's climate change. Steady rise in temperatures over the last couple of decades has placed the baseline climate so high that achieving these extremes, which used to be rare, are now expected because conditions are ripe. We're living the worst case scenarios that the smart people have been warning us about for years. And this is where I come back to this idea of, look, I don't know the answers to all of this, but there's some common sense stuff we should be maybe thinking about. Solar panels to me seem to make sense. And I know there's some sourcing problems, there's some stuff that go along with that, and I get that. How we fix that, how we mitigate that, that's a matter of policy. But when Elon Musk, whom I'm not a fan of, says, look, we have the ability to be energy independent. And he said, look, it's just a small part of a couple of southwestern states. Small areas. They could do it. You just have to have the want and the will. And this is where I keep coming back to this idea that as a country, we used to be part of our pride and part of our identity. Now look, I saw this poll just a little bit ago that said that, the fewest number of people in American history are very proud to be American. And I'm going, if you go back and you think about those hyper-patriotic days, there were things for people to get behind. The moon landing, big thing. Manhattan Project, Marshall Plan. We did big things. We accomplished incredible things. We pulled together to do great things. We can, again, you want people to be extremely proud, very proud to be an American. Because this was are you very proud, somewhat proud? And, the lowest number of people threw in the very. You want people to be very proud of this country? Do some big stuff. Give us a reason to stop hating each other. Give us a reason to come together with a common goal, common purpose. The climate seems to be one of those places. Now, understand, the moneyed interests don't want this. The big oil companies certainly don't want it. The gas industry, not at all. I'm pitched daily by people on both sides of the political aisle going after EVs and going after the future changes to our grid, because the money is flowing. But we could be energy independent. I go back to when we put solar panels on our house. I think it was 2011 or 12. And, my kids, who were very small at the time, were like, how come every house doesn't have solar panels? How come the school doesn't have it? And then their school district put in a massive array. And there was a sense of pride. Look at how incredible this is. And, done with IBEW labor, done with union labor, done on a project labor agreement, all of that stuff. But there was a sense of pride there. We can expand this. It just comes down to the political will. It comes down to the want. And the question is when will we want? When it's too late? I mean, the fact that we're still relying on places like Saudi Arabia and Russia and anyone is just beyond me. And I know, Rick, we need to drill, baby, drill more. Again, and I know my left friends don't like to hear this, but Biden has given out enormous amounts of leases. The industry doesn't want it. They've got more leases than they know what to do with. They've just chosen not to. So the question then becomes, what does it take for us to wake up to this? Is it going to be more wildfires? I don't know where you live, but the reality is, Canada is still burning. And our air quality here in the Susquehanna Valley in Pennsylvania, not good. I was talking to somebody in D.C. today. Air quality, not good. Why? Canada, blame Canada. But more importantly, blame climate change. We now have fire seasons in Canada that affect us. The question is when do we come around to the reality? And I know I've had people tell me, oh, it's all overblown. The planet's, the earthquakes, volcanoes. Yeah, all that stuff. You're right. But I can't imagine. I can't imagine that pulling all the oil out of the ground. And we've seen just a story the other day of how much water we're pulling out of the ground has actually helped somehow tilt the planet a little bit. There's all of this stuff that, because we're depleting natural resources, that we're causing real damage. And as I've said, look, I'm not the expert on this, but I listen to experts. And I listen to people who are going, look, it's code red. The lights are blinking, man. When are you going to do something? And yet we've still got a Republican Party with their head in the sand, or head in the oil companies' profits, because we're still giving them tax subsidies, which is mind-blowing to me. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. It's still, come back to always the main point. It's about the green. It's about the money. It's about the power that the money gives you. And I used to believe that while the wealthy had all the money, we outprocreated them. There are more of us. And if we could come together, and if we could come around to a common idea that, maybe we don't want to die of heat exposure. Maybe we can pass laws that are going to help workers make it through the hot summer. Maybe we're going to be able to pass laws to do some things to help prisoners. Maybe we could do those things. We're not. So the hope is we get on the same page. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break, right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. Jesus Polares, a Chicano miner and union organizer, was deported from the United States. He was charged with having communist sympathies and declared an undesirable alien. At the time he was deported, Polares had been in the United States for more than 20 years. He found work in New Mexico as a coal miner. He first stood up to the mine bosses in Gallup, New Mexico. When he dared to speak out against the company, he was fired. He then went to Madrid, New Mexico, where he became involved in union organizing. There again, he was fired for speaking out, evicted from his company home, and blacklisted. Polares recognized that Chicano mine workers needed to stand strong. He helped to found the Liga Obrera de Habla Española, or the League of Spanish-Speaking Workers. The organization quickly gathered members around northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. It grew from a few hundred miners to more than 8,000 strong. Then in 1935, the miners went on strike in Gallup. Martial law was declared. 300 miners and their families were evicted from their homes. When a warrant was served on one miner to throw them out of their homes, others blocked the doors in an effort to stop the eviction. They were arrested for breaking and entering. Protesters converged on the jail and were met with tear gas. The sheriff and his deputies opened fire on the protesters. The fight left one sheriff and 2 miners dead. In the aftermath, Polares was jailed for his role as a labor leader. He was deported, along with more than 100 other Chicano miners. Deportation was a tool used to stifle organizing amongst Latino workers. Liga Obrera never recovered from the loss of its leaders. The organization lost strength and momentum. But Liga Obrera is proof that workers can organize and fight for a better tomorrow. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. So Jane in Santa Fe sent me an email during the break pointing out the fact that, and I talked about this at the beginning with the Supreme Court overturning affirmative action. You knew this was going to come. She says that Democrats are now calling on Attorney General Merrick Garland to file charges against any college or university that engages in discrimination, i.e., legacy admissions. And this is got to be, this is the next thing. This is where this goes. Now look, I'll tell you, they got to go. I mean, it was always curious to me that how many people, you ever see the movie Animal House? I love Animal House, one of my favorite movies ever. But Flipper was, or Flounder. I mean, Flounder was a legacy. He got into the fraternity because his brother was there. His brother Fred was a frat boy. So Flounder gets in. Didn't have to do anything. He was in. And I remember thinking even back then that's screwed up. I know we want to make sure that we keep the line pure. And it's interesting that there are people who will say affirmative action is bad, but legacy not so much. Curious to me. Also, I want to get some thoughts on. I guess we're going to start sending powdery substances again in the mail. According to the FBI, they're trying to determine where more than 100 letters containing white powder came from. I guess we're going to start this stupidity again. Can't you come up with something better? Oh, we're going to send you fake ricin. Until some idiot actually does it. Also, someone with explosives and an active January 6th warrant evidently was found near Barack Obama's house. We're going to do this. Every time I hear Trump, say, well, people need to educate Jack Smith, his family and his friends. These are the people that he's talking to, the people who are going to send who knows what in the mail, the people who are going to go to somebody's home with explosive devices. This is, now on the Trump front, because I haven't really talked about Trump today. On the Trump front, it looks like there could be more charges against him. This would be interesting. There evidently this thing called superseding indictments, which would add a second set of charges onto what already is there. They're looking at more of this because evidently Rudy went and Rudy bared his soul. Rudy was a songbird. Rudy narked everybody out. Rudy covering his own behind. And it's been reported that he went and had this interview and as a proffer interview, which basically is he sold his soul to keep his behind out of jail. I don't think he should. I think all of that whole display at the Four Seasons landscaping and other places where he was single-handedly selling the steel. He was single-handedly selling a conspiracy theory he knew wasn't true. And you go, well, how do you know he knows? Because he never stood in front of a judge and said it. He'd go out to the Four Seasons parking lot. He'd go on a kangaroo court in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and go on. He'd go all over the place, spew on every TV, radio, everywhere. Conspiracy after conspiracy, allegation after allegation. But when he stepped into that room, the lawyer in him said, no, probably shouldn't do this. This could get me into real trouble. The dupes and the idiots who want to hear the conspiracy, yeah, we'll feed that. We'll feed the outrage, but not going to take the chance of putting my hand on that book and swearing to tell the whole truth and then not and being held accountable for it. So I'm interested to see what comes out of that. Because I'll tell you, I think Trump's in real trouble. Now, will it matter to the base? No, not even a little bit. In fact, it'll make him more loved, which again is weird because The guy lies so well. I mean, to be honest, he lies so proficiently. For instance, you may remember one of the defenses that he had the classified documents is he declassified everything. There's a standing order. There's nothing classified anymore. He has the ability to have it all. It's, maybe it was left in a drawer somewhere, maybe in the vanity in the bathroom, in the guest bathroom, maybe the Lincoln bedroom. Maybe it's in the chamber pot in the Lincoln bedroom. That's where it's at. But nobody can find it. The Justice Department can't find it, and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence can't find it. Nobody can find it. No one can find this mystery standing order that Trump has sworn is there. He did it. Which again means that the stuff is classified. And I don't even know that you can have a standing declassified order that says basically waving a magic wand and go, everything's declassified. We're opening everything. There's nothing that's classified, nothing secret. We're going to give our enemies and our friends and everybody who likes us or don't, we're just going to give it away. It's one of those things where you buy that. I got bridges for sale. Quite remarkable. And finally, Ohio. Ohio is, Pennsylvania is grateful for Ohio because our political system isn't quite as corrupt. We haven't had much scandal lately, but Pennsylvania and Ohio were neck and neck for a while. Ohio has gone way, way off the deep end, where today, the former Speaker of the House, Larry Householder, he was sentenced to the maximum 20 years in prison for his orchestration of the $60 million bribery scheme that everybody in Ohio is paying for. If you live in Ohio, your electric rates shot up 30% because of this guy who lined his pockets and of course, some others. They're good at spreading it around. Now, here's the weird thing. This is the thing that gets me, and that infuriates me. These criminals do this stuff. Okay, he's going to spend a little bit of time in jail. But the people who were behind it, they're still making money off of it. The rate increase sticks. The fruits of the crime stick. That's my problem in all of this stuff. How come we don't go back and undo the damage that the householders of the world have done, that the Trumps of the world have done? This is why elections matter. This is why voting matters. I want to hear your thoughts. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. If something I said got under your skin, got under your nerves, made you mad, made you angry, I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally, especially crazy ones. Sometimes I use them on the air because I like the fringe. So by all means. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show. We're working